This is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and in this video what I want to do is talk about starting to learn Python using REPL. Basically, REPL is a great place to start learning a programming language without having to do all the installation of software, etc. So this is a good place to start. If you did want to install software with Python, there's software called PyCharm. If you head over to my website, devnursery.com, you can find video tutorials on Python. It's around here somewhere. Python. There it is, Python. And there are plenty of videos going over all the features of Python and plenty of other fun things for you to learn all the Python you'd want. Okay? But let's just kind of talk about the basic features of Python and using them in the context of REPL. So essentially, once you create a REPL account, like I have here, I'll click on Create REPL, and I'm going to choose a Python REPL. And we'll just call this Python Practice. And I'll create the REPL. And then it gives me this environment. So just talk about how, so basically this tab right here are your different files. So you can have different files. If you're doing Python, you're probably going to just have Python files, which are files that end in .py. Okay? And then you're going to have your editor here. So this is where you would actually write the code, this area right here. And then you have the console and the shell. Now, just to kind of walk through the differences, if you click run, it'll always run the main.py. And the output will always be in the console, because this represents the Python console, as you can see there. Okay, so essentially if I were to do something like print some text to the screen by saying print hello world, okay, if I were to do print hello world and I hit run, because it's in the main.py, it's going to show up there. Okay, so that's the easiest way to get started. Just put everything in your main.py, this file right here. But if I want to create another file, let's say create another file, and we'll call it cheese.py. Okay, all that matters is that it has a py extension. And I were to sit here and say print goodbye world. If I hit run, it should only run the main.py. So you see, I'm only getting hello world because that's what the way REPL set up. The run button always runs the main file. So I could run other files. That's what going to be the shell tabs for. This is going to be more similar to like using terminal on a Linux machine or the command line. And essentially, I should take all the same commands. So let me just try something out. I'm going to see if I can make a folder. Make dir hello. And yep, see, that makes a folder. Okay, so see, it made a folder. So all your normal terminal commands or bash commands can be used here. But that doesn't particularly matter. Okay, I'm going to delete that folder. So let's just get rid of that folder. But the main thing here is that you can now use the Python commands to install or to run any other Python files, which is just done by doing Python. That's the command saying, hey, Python, do something. And I'm going to say, hey, I want you to run cheese.py. And then you'll see the output in the terminal, goodbye world. Okay? And that's the output from my code right here. Okay? So that's just basically how to run a Python file. You could either put your code in this main.py and hit the run button, which the output will show up in the console, or you can make as many Python files as you want here and just run them in the shell by using commands like Python, then the name of the file, which should be all you really need as you get started. Now, there's other things here, like if you wanted to like commit your code to Git, there's this section, the debugger. I've never used that, but essentially what you should be able to do is like set up breakpoints and kind of pause your code. Never really used it. Here you can install packages, so if you wanted to work with like pandas or whatnot, you'd install those packages here. Set up secret variables. These are just your editor settings, so this is where you can like change the color. So you see I have it in like dark mode, or at least what that setting was here. But you can find little, like how big are your indentations, are they spaces or tabs? So if you really want all your indentations to be like 4 spaces, you could choose spaces and then set it to 4. I mean, it doesn't particularly matter. Side by side, etc. And then this is like a little mini database that's available to in Replit. I've never used it, so but that's a thing. And unit test, that's new. Looks like you can add tests now. That's really cool. But that's essentially the idea. So now that we kind of understand our environment that we'll be working in, let's just start talking about the basic features of Python. Okay, the first thing you should always know in any language is just the command print, or whatever the equivalent is in that language, because it's kind of hard to know what you're doing if I can't kind of output text to the screen. Okay, that's generally going to be like how we know that something happened. And the second thing you want to know, and then this is pretty straightforward, print will just print whatever you put in the parentheses. Okay, print is a built-in function in Python. Okay, so you can always tell a function because you always put the word of the function and then parentheses after it to use it. And then inside the parentheses you put any arguments, which is like just information you're passing the function. So in this case, we're passing the string, and we know it's a string because it's quotation marks. Okay, we're passing the string of hello world to print, and then what print does with that thing that we passed it is just put it on the screen, which we saw over here, hello world. Cool. Now, in Python, I'm pretty sure that it doesn't matter if it's single quotes or double quotes. So again, a string could be single quotes or double quotes. And then see if I hit run, I still get hello world, works exactly the same. Now, why would I use one or the other? I would usually use double quotes. Why? Because then I can use single quotes in the string. I can write, you know, like I'm, hello, I'm world. And see, I can use that single quote there. But if I did single quotes, that's going to be a problem. Because now it thinks that this is one string, and then I have like another string that starts here at the end. Like it's confused because it's treating those single quotes as like beginning and end markers. So it's just easier to use double quotes, in my opinion, most of the time. Okay, and if you're new, it's probably easier just to stick to one way of doing things. It's before getting into a programming language's many way of doing things. So that's probably the easiest way to start. Use double quotes. Yeah, if you did need to use double quotes inside the string, like if you need to use something that you can't use in the string, usually what you do is you put like a forward slash like that, and then you can put like that, and see that will work. This is what's referred to as an escape. Basically what it does, it just tells whoever's reading the code to be like, this is not your normal quotation mark, don't treat this as the end of the string, I just want this string to show up like normal. And see, like if I run this code now, that quotation mark now shows up in the string. Okay, but again, not something I would be too worried about. So again, print is just a function. We are passing it an argument of a string, and then whatever arguments we pass it, it shows up over here. Okay, and we can pass it multiple arguments. So I can be like hello world. Every separate argument gets passed in, gets separated by a comma. So if I do hello world and then goodbye world, I can hit run and see first it does hello world and then does goodbye world. Okay, another way you can add, you could also use concatenation. So I can actually just assemble my strings inside here. So if I do hello plus world, this is called concatenation. And this just means add strings together. I'm just adding them together. Watch what happens when I do hello plus world. See, it puts it together with no space because it just adds these 5 letters to these 5 letters. So I could either add a space here in world like that, so that way there's a space in between them. Or what I could do is I could do this, and that adds them together. Now, I would normally not normally like add just 2 words, like letters like that. Like if I'm going to do that, I would just write hello world as one string. Like that just makes more sense. The reason you would use concatenation is because maybe you have variables that hold strings. So let's talk about making a variable. To make a variable, you just create a name. So we'll just say, you know, string1. Okay, and that's a name. And that's going to be a variable. Notice that it doesn't have quotation marks around it. So it's not a string, it's a variable name. And then I'm going to use the equal sign and say it equals hello. So now this variable equals hello. That's what this equal signs mean. It actually means a sign. So it just means whatever is on the right, the string of hello, gets saved or tucked away in the variable name on the left. So what does string 1 equal? Hello. How do I know that? Well, just to be sure, I can print it. So I'll just say, show me what's inside of string 1. So I can pass a variable as an argument to print, and it'll print whatever's inside the variable. See in there, we see hello. So then I can make another variable, string 2, and I can say world. So now in this case, this is where I'm going to want to use like concatenation, because I can't just do like string 1, string 2. That doesn't work. It'll just think it's a different variable. So I can do string 1 plus string 2. It takes the word hello and adds it to the word world. Okay, and we get the hello world, but again, no space. So in this case, I would want to add the space in between, and then we get hello world. Okay, so that's concatenation. Concatenation is whenever I use plus signs to take a bunch of strings and put them together. Cool. I'll leave it at that. There's another thing called interpolation, but again, keeping it simple, just to get you used to just doing things one way before I give you 1,000 ways of doing them. Okay? But that's what print does, and this is how you create a variable. And strings aren't the only type of data you can save in variables. I could save what's called a integer in a variable. So we'll say int1 is the name of the variable, and an integer is any whole number. Okay, so 55, that's an integer. That's all it is. It's a whole number. It's a number without a decimal. Okay. Then there are floats. So we'll say float1, and a float is just any number with a decimal. So we can just say 55.6. That's a float. That's an integer. See the difference? One has a decimal, one does not. Okay. And then you have booleans, which could either be true or false. So we'll say bool1. And it always just means true. And notice, no quotation marks. It's not a string. It's true. It's an actual like reserved word. A reserved word are just words that Python already uses out of the gate. So you can't use them for your variable names because Python already used them. True and false are used to represent and they're uppercase in Python, which I personally find annoying because in most other languages it's lowercase, so you don't have to hit the shift key for that one keystroke. But yeah, so true just means true, and false means false. Okay, so these are the different types of values you can save in a variable so far. And the thing is that Python is what's called it's dynamically typed, meaning I don't actually have to write the word string anywhere. So I don't have to tell Python that this variable is a string. It knows it's a string because I put a string in it. But it's strongly typed in the sense that if I were to try to add string 1 to int1, it's going to throw me an error because this is a string and this is an integer. And since there's two different types of data, Python's going to be like, I don't know if you can mix those together. Like that's not cool. Okay, so watch what happens. I get this error. And whenever you're reading like a Python error, just skip to the end. Like, oh, this is like just basically gibberish. Really what matters is this very last line where it says like the error. Type error can only concatenate string, not int. So it's telling you, hey, strings and an int can't go together. You can't splice them together. It's kind of like that South Park episode. You know, an elephant and a pig's DNA just won't splice. Okay, a string and an integer just won't splice together. So how do I put the number in the string? Well, then we have to do what's called typecasting. Pretty much, you can take the name of the type as a function and convert things. So in this case, what I would do is like, what's the name of the type that I want? I want this integer to become a string. So I type string, and then I wrap the integer in parentheses. Okay, maybe I need a capital. Is that what I need? Well, let's see here. I think string, undefined string. Is it string? Is it capital string? Oh, I know what it is. str. There we go. So you do see string, and that's a function that will convert whatever is given to the function, the argument. In this case, we're giving it the number int1, and converts it to a string. So that way I can put it in the string. So there it goes, hello 55. Now it works. Vice versa, if I wanted to add two numbers, so let's just say, let's make a third string that equals the number 3 as a string. So see, that's a string, not a number, because it has the quotation marks around it. If I wanted to print, or if I wanted to first let's just do this. We'll say result. Actually, let's do this. Print. And then I'm just going to say int1, which is 55. And I want to add that to string 3. Again, I'm going to get that same concatenation issue. They have to be the same type. But I don't want to add them as a string. I don't want to do stir, because I want 3 to be treated as a number, even though it's currently a string. Because again, that's what I did on line 5. So what I can do is I can again convert it to an int. So I would just type in the name of the type, use parentheses, and these are just built-in functions in Python. You just kind of learn them as you go. So in that case, int will turn. Oh, I'm using it on the wrong variable. Boop, 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 boop. Int1 is already an integer. It's string 3. That's a string. So int, and that's going to convert string 3 into an int. So it's going to take that 3 and turn it into the number 3, and I'm going to be able to then hit run, and I should get 58. See, it took the 55 plus 3, and instead of concatenating strings, because see, when the two things are strings, the plus sign mushes the strings together and concatenates. When they're two numbers, it's going to add them together. It's going to realize, okay, you want me to do math. And you have all your normal math operators in Python. So like if I were just to go back, delete all that, and just be like print 1 plus 1, let's say 5 plus 5. And let's just do all the other kind of math operators. Oops. Print minus 5 times 5 divided by 5. I'm pretty sure this is exponent, so that means like 5 to the 5th power. And then this is modulo, which I'll talk about in a second. Okay, so 5 to the 5th power is 3,120. Okay, well, again, let's just go through one by one. So 5 plus 5 is 10, correct. 5 minus 5 is 0, that's correct. 5 times 5 is 25, that's correct. 5 divided by 5 is 25, that is correct. And 5 to the 5th power, I'm going to assume that's correct. Let's do the math, make sure that I'm understanding this correctly. Let's just look up a calculator. There we go. So let's see here. 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 times 5. What does that equal? Yep, 3,125. So that is correct. Oops, that's not what I want to open. Okay. That is correct. Cool. Now modulo 5, we got 0. What does that mean? Okay, so this one's a little bit trickier to understand at first. The way I think about modulo, it's called the remainder operator. It's just basically trying to tell you what's left after dividing a number. The easiest way to think about it is that I have 5 slices of pizza that I need to distribute among 5 friends evenly. So if I gave the 5 pieces of pizza to my 5 friends, how many would I have left? 0. But let's say I said 8. If I had 8 slices of pizza divided among my 5 friends, and I can't give anybody more slices than the other. So I gave each friend 1 slice, and I still have 3 slices left over, so the result would be 3. And see, I get 3. Okay, so I can imagine 8 slices of pizza, 5 friends. How many extra slices do I have? 3. But if I did, like, let's say 12, technically each friend could get 2 slices of pizza, right? And I'd still have some pizza left over. So I'd give my 5 friends each 2 slices of pizza, because that's an even amount. I had to give them, an amount that is equal to the others. So I can give each friend 2 slices of pizza, but I'd still have 2 left over. And so C modulo is 2. So that's all modulo is telling us, is how much pizza is left over. The only reason you care about this calculation is that sometimes you want to know, is something divisible by another number? Okay, so if I want to know, like, is 12 an even number, I would say, because what is an even number? A number that's divisible by 2. Okay, you can easily divide any even number by 2. So is 12 divisible by 2? If the result of modulo is 0, that number is divisible by that number. That's all it is. Okay, that's the easiest way to think about it. If the result is 0, that number, 12, is divisible by 2. In that case, it's even. Okay? So that's what modulo does. Okay, again, this is an exponent, so like 5 to the 5th power. And then these are just your standard math operators. Okay, cool. Nice. And then we have, like, let's start talking about if statements. So an if statement is when you write if, and then in parentheses you write a Boolean expression. That means, like, you're asking whether something is true or false. So I could do something like, let's create a variable. I'm going to say x, this is the variable name, and x equals 10. Okay? So now I don't know what x is. I want to say, like, is x less than 11? Okay? So that's what an if statement is doing. It's saying, is the thing in the parentheses true? If it is true, and again, now we're trying to get into creating, like, blocks of code in Python. Here what we do is whenever you have, like, an if statement or a loop or a function, you always put a colon at the end of the line where you declare, like, this block, and then on the next line you have to tab. Usually your editor should automatically tab for you. But Python is very strict about this tabbing. Okay, it doesn't use curly brackets, so the way it knows what code belongs to the if statement is that all the code that belongs to the if, meaning the code that runs, if that is true, is going to be tabbed. So if it's true, I'll print, print true. And then once I leave the tab, so I go back to the main line, that means that block of code is done, and now I'm doing an else block. Okay, and then I do the same thing, print false. Okay, and then that's that. So basically the way this reads is that if x is less than 11, print true. If that's not true, else print false. Okay, and then we hit run, and we get true. So what I want you to do is just take a minute, try out different numbers. So see if I change x to 3, which would be less than 11, I still get true. But let's see if I change it to 15, which is above 11, I get false. So this was the first thing that was referred to under a category called control flow. No longer is our code just running one line after the other. We're now saying, hey, only run certain lines if something is true. We're creating what's called a conditional logic, okay? And this what makes programs more fun. It's like, if you click the button, do this. If you click that button, do that. If you do this, do this. And that's, when your programs really start coming to life. Okay? I don't know why this keeps copying and pasting. Let me just delete all that. So let's try this. Let's make a program where you ask some questions. So there's a function in Python called input. And what input does is that it's going to ask the user for some input. So for example, if I say the variable x equals input, and we'll just say, what is your name? Okay, and basically what happens is that it's going to print this out and then expect you to type something back. Whatever you type in then gets saved in this variable called x. And then we'll just print it. Okay, print x. And so if I run the code now, see it says, what is your name? And see the cursor is still there waiting for me to give it input. So I'm going to say Alex Merced. And see it prints Alex Merced because it saved that thing that I typed in the variable x. Cool. So let's do this. Let's ask for a number. Let's ask for a number. So give me a number. Okay. Now the thing you have to keep in mind is that the result of input is always a string. So assuming that the user gave you a number, it's not a number yet, it's just a string of that number. So we should probably convert that to a number. So we'll say like int, we'll make another variable called y, and we just say take whatever x is, the string that the user typed in, and turn it into a number, just to make sure we have a number. And I'm going to write a comment here. So to write a comment in your code in Python, you put a hash. So I would say write an if that will print a message if the number is above 5, and a different message if it's below 5. Okay, so now pause the video, take a second, try this out, see if you can get it working, and then when you got it working, unpause the video and we'll go over the solution. Okay, I'm going to assume you've done the thing. And here we go. So again, I write an if statement. Always in the parentheses is what you're trying to evaluate is true or false. So I'm trying to evaluate is 5 above, or yeah, if the number, so in this case y, is above 5. And then if that's true, then we will print it's above 5. And then again, you do the else if it's not true. So in that case, if it's not above 5. Else, and then we'll just say print it's below 5. Okay. Now if I do this, again, if I run the code, it asks me for a number. I will give it the number 3. I hit enter. It's below 5. Good. Let's try that again. I give it the number 8. It's above 5. Good. Let me run it again. Okay, and I'll give it the number 5. It's below 5. Now that's a little odd, right? Because technically 5 is not below 5. So technically you do have another way you could do this. Okay, maybe we want to check if it's below 5. So we might do something called, it's an elif, meaning an else if. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask another question. So now we're going to ask, is y below 5? Okay, and then we write our code. So print it's below 5. And then we'll do our else block, because that means those previous two questions are false. Because the way it works, it does the if. If the if is false, then it goes to the else if. And if the else if is false, and you can have as many else ifs if you want, so you can have a whole bunch of else ifs chained together, then the last else just means all the above else is false. I'll do this, worst comes to worst. So in this case, we say else y, actually else, you don't put anything, you just do else colon. In this case, you just say print it's 5. Okay, so now if I try this again and I say 5, it's 5. If I try 3, it's below 5. If I try 7, it's above 5. Okay, pretty cool. So that's an if statement. Okay, very nice. Now let's create a loop. Okay, so actually we'll keep the input, except this time it's going to say how many times you want to repeat. So I'll keep that part right there. How many times to repeat. Okay, now when it comes to the loop, there's generally 3 steps. First step is you have to kind of have some sort of way of tracking how many times you looped, because you don't want it to loop forever. Okay, so what I would do is I'll create a variable called counter, and counter will equal 0. So that way, like, it starts at 0, and every time, what we need to do is that every time the code repeats, we are going to have it go up 1. So then we're going to create a loop. And we're going to say while, and the way while means loop the code, do the code over and over again, and do it until as long as the thing in the parentheses is true. So we're going to say as long as counter is less than y. Okay, because y is the number of times you told me you want to loop. So long as we haven't counted up to that number yet, we'll keep looping. And then just like the if statement, we put a colon at the end, and then we tab the lines of code that belong to the while. Okay, so in this case, we'll just say print y, and then we want to make sure that we add 1 to, not to y. We want to print the counter so that we can see what number loop we're on. And then we want to add 1 to counter. Okay, I could do this. I could say counter equals counter plus 1. That works. That'll just take whatever the current value of counter is and add 1 to it. So that way it just keeps going up by 1. But what I could also do, and whichever way is more straightforward you can use, I can do plus equals 1, which does the exact same thing. It just takes whatever the current value of counter is and adds 1 to it. Okay, and you can do that with like minus equals, multiply equals. It's just that way you don't have to keep writing counter twice. So instead of writing counter equals counter plus 1, I could just write counter plus equals 1. It's just a shorthand for the same thing. Okay, but if I run this code now, it's going to ask me how many times I want to loop. So I'll say I want to loop 8 times. And there we go. So see, it starts with 0. It loops. So 0 is less than y. So then it does it again. And again, we've been adding 1 to counter on each loop. So counter keeps going up. And then it doesn't do it the last time because the last time it's no longer less than 8. If you did want the 8 to print, then we could change this to like less than or equal than to y. And then now when I type in 8, we'll get that last loop. Oops, I hit the wrong button. Okay, there we go. 8 and 0, 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8. So that's a loop. Okay. Now, here's what I want you to do, and take a minute to do that. Write an if statement in the loop so that it only prints the even numbers. Okay, take a pause and just do that for a second. And when you're done, unpause it and I'll go over it. Okay, cool. I'm assuming you've done the thing. Okay. So again, I said to make an if statement. So I still want that plus 1 because I want to make sure we keep going up 1. But I'm going to replace this print with the if statement. And I'm going to say if, and I remember I mentioned earlier, the way we figure out if a number is even is we would take the number, which is counter. We want to know if the counter is even. And we do modulo 2. Modulo 2 will see if it's divisible by 2. And if that equals 0, because again, there should be no remainder if it's divisible. So if modulo is 0 for any number, that number is divisible by that number. So in this case, counter is divisible by 2 if the result of counter modulo 2 is 0, which just means it's even. Okay, and honestly, like that's 90% of the time what you'll be doing with modulo, if anything, and it's always this particular expression: is the number even, odd or even? So then I would do another colon at the end of the if, but again, see, now I have to do a separate tab. So I can end up tabbing as many times as you go deep as you start making these blocks inside of another block. So I'm making an if block inside a while block. So the while block gets its own indentation, and now the if block gets its own indentation. And again, it doesn't matter if it's spaces or tabs. So, but the people in Silicon Valley, they had that episode about tabs versus spaces. So you have some people with really strong opinions about tabs versus spaces. I'm whatever works. Okay. So if counter modulo 2 equals, so if that's even, then print the counter. Okay, and so basically this code will only run if this if is true. Otherwise it won't. So now when it's on the odd numbers, it should just not print anything at all. So the result is I only see the even numbers. I have to give it like, let's say 10. That's how many loops we want to make. And then there we go, 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Okay, so that's kind of how you start doing this. Cool. Now what if I want to like do this 3 times? Do I really want to write this whole code 3 times? That would be kind of really tedious, wouldn't it? What you can do is you can actually wrap code that you would like to do multiple times in what's called a function. A function is just code that you can repeat, okay? And the way you write a function is you write the word def, meaning you're defining a function, and we'll just call it, you know, even loop, okay? That's what we'll call it, even loop, and then you write a parentheses. Don't worry about what the parentheses is right now. Right now, just leave it empty, and then we put a colon at the end. So what this just means is I'm defining a function called even loop, and what we'll do is we'll copy all the code we've written so far into that function. Okay, and again, that's going to get its own tab, because again, every type of block, so a function block also gets its own tab. But now I paste that in there, and I just need to fix these tabs, because these need to be tabbed with the function. Because again, the tabs tell it what belongs where. There we go. So I'm going to tab that, tab that, tab that. Okay, and that's good. Actually, no, that needs to be tabbed one more time too. Okay, so you see, like, all of this, since it's tabbed one over, belongs to the function block. This code, because it's tabbed over again, belongs to the while block, and then this code, because it's tabbed over one more time, belongs to the if block. Okay? So now I've defined this function. Okay, so now I can call this function as many times as I want. Nice. So now I can do like even loop. So in the same way you call print, we can call even loop now. So it's got to be the exact same name, so even loop with a capital L. And then I just put parentheses, meaning I'm calling the function, meaning I'm using the function. So I can now do this whole thing 3 times. And now what's going to happen is that when I run the code, it's going to ask me to loop 3 times. So watch. I'll say 8. And see, now it asks me again. 9. And it asks me again. 5. And I gave it different numbers. And see, I didn't have to write all of this 3 times for it to happen 3 times. Because I wrapped it in a function, I'm able to repeat that code multiple times. Just by calling the function that I defined. So first I defined the function. It's kind of like, think of it as like writing down a recipe. Like first you got to write it down, and then you can bake it or cook it several times. Or think of it as like a wizard spell. A wizard's got to write a spell in his spell book before he can cast it several times. So casting the spell or baking the recipe, that's referred to as calling the function. That's what this is. Another word for that is invoking the function. And that's always got to be done with parentheses. So you put the name of the function, follow it with parentheses, and that tells Python that you're invoking or calling the function. Cool. And okay, one last variable. Let's say you want to change like the starting number that it counts at. What you can do is you can create what's called a parameter. A parameter is a variable that you declare here in this parentheses. Okay, we'll just call it, you know, start. Okay, it doesn't matter what you call it. Okay, but this variable now becomes a placeholder for information that I can pass here, for an argument. So let's just say going forward, the counter, instead of starting at 0, starts at whatever start is. I don't know what start is. Okay, start gets defined every time I call the function. So based in this parentheses, I have to pass it what I want start to be. In the same way, you pass a string to print, and that's how print knows what to print. Even loop will know what start is because I'm going to give it to it. So I'll say the first time start is 0, the second time start is 5, and the second time start is 10. Okay, so now it'll loop from, you know, that starting number to the number that we specify. So I can say run from 0 to, we'll say 10. Let's see if we get that. But then if I do 10 again, see, I'm only getting the numbers between 5 and 10 that time because the start is 5, because that's what I pass as an argument. So this number right here becomes start that time I call the function. because each function call is its own run of the code. So I'm running this code 3 times. The first time start's going to be 0. The second time I run the code, start's going to be 5. And the third time I run the code, start is 10. So basically this placeholder is known as a parameter, and then the actual thing that I use to fill the placeholder when I call the function is called a argument. Okay, so how many times to repeat? Let's just do the last one. I'll just do 30. And you see it starts at 10 because I said start at 10. Cool. So this should be a solid starting place for playing with Python. Try to do some more like loops and ifs. Maybe create like a little choose your own adventure game where you ask for input, and then depending on what the user chooses, you do if statements to be like, choose this or that, and if they do that, this text appears and they get asked another question, building a whole sort of story. That's a good way to kind of just get started getting used to this. But with that, I'll let you play with that. Another good thing to do is, again, check out my other videos regarding Python. And also, another good place to go is go to codewars.com to actually practice what you learn. Oops, codewars.com. Codewars.com. Okay, and then what you do is you just go here to look for code challenges, this kata. And then what you do is look for level 8. Level 8 are the easiest ones. My recommendation is to look for the ones that have the word grasshopper in the name. They're the easiest to get you started. Okay, so for example, like this one right here, if I click on the Python symbol, debug say hello, this just wants me to find the bug. So the Starship Enterprise has run into some problems. Okay, so they really just want us to look at this and see if we see a mistake. So we see def, they're defining a function, say hello, name. Okay. And essentially, basically, what it wants us to do is create a function that gives us back hello, Mr. Spock. So I see that first off, this is not tabbed, so that's a mistake there. And I don't think it's returning that. So what I want to do is return, because a function has to return a value, especially for like programming challenges. Your goal is not to print the text. Your goal is to return the value. Usually it'll handle the printing. Okay, so I want to return hello, but not just hello, hello Mr. Spock. So I can just use concatenation because that's what we've done so far. So hello, comma, space, because that's what's next in this string. And then I'm going to assume the rest of it is going to be inside of name. So then we'll do plus name. So hello, name. So that looks like a proper function. So then what we do is we hit the test button here, and it'll test if it works and give us back any errors. And you see this pass all the test cases. Okay, good. So if that's the case, now I'll submit it, hit this attempt button. It passed even more tests, no errors. So see, passed 45 tests, failed 0. Good, which means I'm good to go. So I hit submit. And then I will get points for doing that challenge. Okay, and then there we go. Okay, cool. If I go back over here, I should see that I got points, or I should get points eventually. Okay. And then there we go. Okay, and then you can see like your score among friends, and it's all pretty good. Okay, so my name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day and enjoy. I'll see y'all later.